I don't know about you, but for me, EA Sports UFC was one of the most highly anticipated games set to be released in 2014. We've got an opportunity to see screenshots, we've seen videos, we've even played the demo, but last week, the game in all of its glory was released for both PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. And here's my take on the game, on the full retail version of the game. Taking a look at the graphics and animation, which of course is the first thing that pops out for everyone, it looks awesome. The fighters are rendered as well, if not better, than any other sports game ever released, and I don't think that that is a overstatement. They look awesome. I mean, we're talking about photorealistic quality from the women as well all the way to the men, which is something that is rare because quite often games that do or render females don't actually capture them accurately. But as you can see there from the picture of Ronda Rousey and the upcoming picture here of Sarah McMahon, that is done very well as well. Going beyond just the fighter renders, if you look into the crowd and the entire environments and arenas, the living worlds are done amazing. EA has really stepped up their game in regards to showing the atmosphere of a sporting event and making it actually look real. Looking at the animations, for the most part, they're solid. There are a couple times where you'll see a leg get caught up or something that may not make total sense from a physics standpoint. So that's something that in future versions of the game you can only hope that will be cleaned up. For the most part though, there's nothing here that happens from an animation standpoint that's going to make you too dissatisfied. As I said, it is not perfect from that standpoint, but it is far better than average, and the collision detection is pretty solid. There's a really nice real-time physics quality to the game. So this is something that is absolutely the strength of the title. You can tell that everything was based on making the game look good first. Now let's talk about how well the game plays. Your level of enjoyment in regards to the gameplay on EA Sports UFC is probably going to be based on what your expectations were. Can you call this game an absolute true simulation? My answer to that is no. That said, it is not a complete arcade game that is devoid of the concepts and qualities of real mixed martial arts. Where it fails in realism is there are too many spectacular moves that don't automatically result in either a fighter being stunned or a fighter being knocked out. That's a balance that's very difficult for game developers to walk, because if you made a game ultra realistic where all of the major shots had the real effect that they would in real life, most fights with most gamers would take all of 5 to 7 seconds before someone landed that type of shot. I still contend that a mode that was ultra realistic in that way should still exist on these games. The people who prefer an arcade performance or an arcade experience should have that option as well. But if you really want to go what I would call hardcore for the sport, there should be a setting there available for that. Now, all of that said, the gameplay for EA Sports UFC is terribly addictive. It is extremely fun and very, very addictive online, especially on head-to-head competition. There's so many games within a game, from the submission game to the ground game to the stand-up game to the clinch game, and all of them have specific strategies, and all of the fighters have specific skills and strengths and weaknesses where all of those different aspects of the game can be exposed, or you can take advantage of that if your fighter is good in that particular area. That's exactly how mixed martial arts is supposed to go. But just with a few tweaks here and there, the gameplay could have actually been a complete home run. That said, it is still a strength. Let's move to something that's not necessarily a strength, or not a strength: the sound and presentation. Well, EA still lags behind when it comes to presentation. Now, we may look at things like the living worlds and overlays and that sort of thing, and that is part of presentation, and it does augment the overall experience in a game. That said, there are things like the commentary that is still not up to par when it comes to an EA game. Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg do a decent job. It's not one of the worst commentating jobs you'll ever find in a sports game, but it certainly isn't one of the best. How do you judge what's a good or bad commentating performance or aspect of a game in a sports video game? How quickly, if ever, are you either tuning out the commentary or inclined to turn it off altogether? In this particular game, I wouldn't estimate anyone gets past 5 to 6 days before they're completely tuning out the commentary or possibly even turning it off. There's not enough added that is on a fight per fight basis. There's a lot of general statements that if you fight with a certain fighter a few times, you're going to hear over and over again. Now, part of the issue with that is the lack of depth with the career mode, which we'll get into that once we get into the modes and options aspect, because a good commentary experience can actually be fed by the new experiences that are happening in your career mode. If that's not happening there, then it limits where the actual commentary can go. From a visual presentation standpoint, the game is this aspect of the game is clearly helped by how good the game just looks, period. The game looks so good, it's so easy to mistake it for an actual UFC presentation. It really is. So that helps it from a visual standpoint, but from a sound aspect, it is still lagging behind. So this is one of the weakest aspects of the title. And let's move into another area of opportunity, which is modes and options. You can create a fighter, but you only get 10 slots, which is pretty limited in this day and age for create a player or create a fighter suites. You can use the game face, but you need to make sure that the picture that you use for game face is very well lit and your face is lined up perfect. If not, you're going to get a guy looking like that guy right there, which is not exactly right. So, but the option that there is a game face there still makes this one of, if not the most detailed create a fighter or create a player options there is available, period. Many other games like the 2K series almost completely ignore this aspect of sports gaming, and it is something that really deserves a little bit more attention. Moving into the actual career mode, there's a good concept here, starting from the Ultimate Fighter and moving up through your career with an attempt to maintain longevity, maintain popularity, and win championships, which is pretty customary. But the actual career mode itself is pretty empty. There's not enough interaction with your fighter and things that are happening outside of his fights and his training. It doesn't necessarily engross you in an entire year-long calendar of what's happening in your virtual UFC world. So there's a few things here that need some depth. If you look at an option like Fight Night Champion, which is actually made by the exact same developers as EA Sports UFC, they did something really cool with the career mode. You took a character and you went through this entire pre-planned storyline, and yes, it didn't have a lot of longevity, but it did give you something. It was called Champion Mode, that was a little bit out of the ordinary and cool, and it was there in addition to a traditional career mode. Just adding more depth to the options would be great, because as it stands, EA Sports UFC is really, it could have functioned as an all online title, because in terms of your longevity and in terms of what's going to get regular rotation from you, that aspect of the game is probably what you're going to play the most. If you don't have online, or if you're not interested in online play, you may find it very difficult to get your feel of EA Sports UFC. You may not have as much fun unless you have a situation where you have someone there with you locally who can play, you can play head to head with, because head to head is really where this game shines the most. After a while, you're going to get to a point where handling the CPU opponent is gonna, it's gonna come pretty fair to you, and really seeking out more challenges is gonna have to come online or head to head against someone that's sitting right next to you. So this is a pretty bare bones feature set, and to a certain degree it's somewhat understandable because it's the first game in the series. But when you consider the fact that we're looking at probably 18 months before the next one comes out, that's kind of rough in a sense. So you're going to have to get your feel online. Now, in terms of the fighter roster, there's a lot of fighters there, but there are some notable omissions. Bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw is not in the game, and there's others who aren't that could. Brendan Schaub's not in the game, who you could make a case should be. Now, to EA UFC's credit, they're going to be adding fighters for free download. So that is a major plus. But it didn't help the modes and options score all that much in my book. So you see, the graphics and animation is a 9, gameplay and realism is 8.5, sound and presentation is a 7, and the modes and options are a 6.75, which come to a cumulative average score of an 8. This is a solid game, especially if you have online. If not, you may consider whether or not this is something you want to invest in. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, follow, peace.